Welcome to India Indian News. Our guest today is Rama Ramakrishnan. He is a professor at MIT's Sloan School of Management and a tech entrepreneur. I heard him speak recently at TiCon, where he gave a keynote address on ChatGPT. We were very impressed by his presentation at TiCon, and we invited him to our studio to teach us and to educate many people like us who are not very familiar with AI and ChatGPT. So, Rama, welcome to our studio.
Thanks very much for having me.
Sure. This is the second time you are here,
Yes.
so welcome again.
No, it's great to be back.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So, right now, everybody's talking about ChatGPT and AI. And there is a lot of confusion between these two terms.
Right.
Are the same, they are different things. And also ChatGPT, how it is going to affect the future of jobs, the economy, the government, politics, society, etc.
Sure.
So we'll come back to on that. But let us first start with what is the difference between ChatGPT and AI?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think it's actually a source of much confusion. Perhaps I can start by giving sort of a very quick idea of what AI is, and then I will sort of locate ChatGPT within the circle of
Perfect, yeah.
So, artificial intelligence, broadly defined, is really the quest to give computers the ability to do things that previously only humans could do. Typically cognitive tasks, thinking tasks. We had a lot of success in AI for many decades, but the success was quite limited. And then sort of a breakthrough happened, and that was really the invention of something called machine learning. So if you imagine AI as a big circle, machine learning is a smaller circle inside AI.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic idea of machine learning is that instead of writing down exactly how the computer should follow your instructions and then just programming those instructions for the computer, which was the old approach, people said, you know what? Instead of doing that, why don't we just come up with lots of examples of what the computer should do, and then teach the computer to just learn what to do from those examples.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea, roughly defined, is machine learning. Now, within machine learning, another breakthrough happened, and this really is the seminal breakthrough, which has brought us ChatGPT now. And this breakthrough is called deep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of deep learning is really, it's sort of machine learning, but applied to problems where the input data is unstructured.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you want to take an image and figure out if the image contains a picture of a dog or a cat, or if you take a bunch of text, natural language, and figure out if that text has positive sentiment or negative sentiment, things of that sort, where the input data is what's called unstructured. Machine learning traditionally wasn't very good, but deep learning actually is superb at it, right? And that's sort of a key breakthrough. So that is deep learning. So AI is the big circle, machine learning is a circle inside of it, and then deep learning is a smaller circle inside the machine learning circle.
So how many circles are there?
We're almost there. One more circle to go.
Okay.
So, and then within deep learning, the ability to not just take in unstructured data like images and text, but to actually produce them, to generate them, right? That was the next breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And that is called generative AI. So you take an image, you can produce another image. You take a piece of text, you can produce another piece of text, much like humans would generate text. And that is generative AI. And within generative AI, there's a class of technologies which work with text and images and produce text in return.
Mm-hmm.
And ChatGPT is an example of that class of technologies.
Okay.
So I'm done with my circles.
Okay.
The big AI circle, the machine learning circle, the deep learning circle, and within deep learning, generative AI circle. And ChatGPT is an example of something that's in that inner fourth circle.
Okay.
So now that gives you sort of a sense for the landscape.
It does, yes. So now everybody, you go anywhere in business meetings or, kids, school, college, everybody talking about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So now some of us who really don't know how ChatGPT works and what it is, if you can just explain that for a layman.
Sure. I think the idea behind ChatGPT is actually really simple. And basically, ChatGPT is a mathematical model, and we don't have to get into the details of what's going on under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who are technically curious, it uses something called the neural network.
Mm-hmm.
But the fundamental idea of ChatGPT is that it is trained to predict the next word in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So you give it part of a sentence, it has to predict the next word.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you give it the phrase, the cat sat on the, right? It has to predict Matt as the most likely next word.
Mm.
Initially, it'll predict some nonsense, right? It'll say the cat sat on a spaceship.
Mm.
And then you basically do the equivalent of like a mathematical rap on its knuckles and say, bad, don't do that.
Mm.
And it keeps on trying. And at some point, it says the cat sat on the mat. Then you say, great job, right? It's not like training a dog. So you can train a model to repeatedly predict the next word that follows a sentence. So if you say elementary, my dear, it'll come back and say Watson. Right? And how this training is done, OpenAI, the company that built ChatGPT, they gathered roughly 30 billion sentences from across the internet and from across a whole bunch of books. And then they trained this model to repeatedly predict the next word till it became really good at it. So when you actually ask ChatGPT a question, all it's doing is it's taking whatever you asked, and then it says, hey, what is the most likely next word that's going to follow this thing?
So the question of speed, how quickly it is able to do 30 billion sentences.
No, that's actually a really good question. So once you train it on these 30 billion sentences, you don't need the sentences anymore.
Okay.
The model is ready to go.
Oh.
Right? It's very lightweight at that point. So you just give it a sentence, boom, it pops out the next word. Then you take that word and you attach it to the original sentence and send it back in again, it'll pop the second word out. You take the first two words, attach it to the third word, and so on and so forth. And by doing this thing repeatedly, it can actually produce a whole novel, right?
Really?
Not just the next word. But the fundamental idea is next word prediction, repeated next word prediction. That's really what's going on under that.
And how important is the input part of this?
I think it's very important. It's sort of, like the old adage of garbage in, garbage out has not changed. It's like the law of gravity. So the ability to pose just the right question, just the right way is really, really important, which is why, we may actually, if you ask it to do something, it may not give you a satisfactory answer. And then you go change one little word in what you asked to some other word, suddenly you'll get the right answer. So it's very sensitive to the kind of questions you ask. And in fact, the questions we ask, they are called prompts in the literature. And there's a whole new field called prompt engineering or prompt design, which tries to teach people how best to ask these questions. And so that's an example of a field that did not exist 2 years ago.
Sure.
And it has suddenly come into existence. I don't know how long it's going to be around, but certainly a new field. And that's actually an example of, the fact that ChatGPT, in fact, will create a lot of new kinds of jobs that don't currently exist, which we can come back to when we talk about.
Yeah, we're coming back to that. But now my next question to you is, what about the accuracy, for example?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I think given that it's repeatedly predicting the next word, you have to be very careful because the output that comes from ChatGPT may be inaccurate, factually inaccurate. It actually might be irrelevant, meaning it may be accurate, but it may not answer your question. Or it may be offensive. It may be biased, toxic. There are a whole bunch of ways in which it may not be appropriate, right? It's not the output that you want. And so essentially, when you're using ChatGPT, it's really important not to use it in some sort of automated fashion where you just feed it something, it produces something, you just send it out to the real world, your customers see it, your partners see it. I think that's actually very dangerous. You always need some human being who can look at the output and make sure it's correct, make sure it's valid, it's not offensive and things like that. The need for I call it sort of human QA, right? Quality assurance. The need for human QA has never been greater when you work with these tools.
Yeah. So sentences, I understand 30 billion sentences. What about image and video?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing. So, I talked about the fact that these 4 circles in AI, the innermost circle is generative AI. Well, inside that generative AI, I was lying, unfortunately. There are actually 2 little circles.
Okay.
One of them is the thing that we call ChatGPT, which is called the large language model, which is text in, text out. There's another whole class of models which are called diffusion models, in which text comes in and images go out. So you can give it a piece of text like, something, this is very popular on Twitter, an astronaut riding a horse, right? Which obviously has not existed ever.
Sure.
But it can create a picture of an astronaut riding a horse. So you can go with a text prompt to an image. So I think, that those are also part of generative AI because it is generating stuff, generating images instead of generating text. What is actually happening in the field is these things are merging. They are converging into what are called multimodal models, where you can imagine a model which takes in text as input, video as input, images as input, and it can produce text as output, videos as output, and so on and so forth. In fact, GPT-4 can already take in an image and analyze the image for you. Like, for example, I remember seeing a demo where they fed GPT-4 a picture of somebody's refrigerator. They opened the refrigerator and took a picture of what's in the fridge, like whatever vegetables, whatever they have in the fridge. And then they sent that picture into GPT-4, and then they sent in a piece of text which said, hey, tell me something interesting I can cook with the ingredients that you see in the picture.
Really?
Right. And it came back with a recipe. However, you have to be very careful. Remember what I said, that the need for human QA has never been greater. So the recipe it comes back with, well, it may use things that are not in the fridge. So you got to be careful. And even if it uses the things that are in the fridge, it may not be very tasty, right? It's all based on next word prediction, right? So, but what is shocking is the fact that it is as accurate. While it's not 100% accurate, it's remarkably accurate. So
and
much
the
of the time.
sentence structure is fantastic.
It's beautiful.
Grammar is fantastic. That's incredible that,
Absolutely.
the grammar, the sentence construction.
Yeah, the sentence coherence, the grammar correctness, everything is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it's actually interesting to note that ChatGPT is built on something called GPT-3, which was the first of such models to actually exhibit this sort of grammatical correctness, sentence coherence, and things like that. GPT-2 and GPT, which were the predecessors to GPT-3, did not have that ability.
Okay.
So we are clearly seeing that as models become bigger and bigger, they begin to do lots of interesting things that the smaller versions of those models could not do.
Yeah. So now let's move to the bigger picture of AI.
Sure.
And again, the people are also talking about AI in life. Anywhere you go in business, everywhere,
Right.
the architects, the designers, the life sciences companies, everywhere AI,
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that and how that is going to impact the industry and economy.
Yeah, I think, maybe I'll divide my sort of comments into two parts. One part is sort of AI broadly speaking, and the other part is, technologies like ChatGPT in particular.
Okay.
So, AI has been around for a while now, ever since the deep learning revolution, which sort of started around roughly 2010, 2011, 2012. It has had a lot of impact on lots of things. So, for example, we basically have solved what's called the protein folding problem, right? There's a AI system called AlphaFold, which has been used to essentially figure out the 3D structure of all 200 million known proteins, right? Somebody said that for each protein, typically it's 5 years of a PhD work, PhD level work. So we have saved 1 billion years of work using this tool. And people predict that this tool is going to be used to, accelerate a whole bunch of drug discovery and so on and so forth. So traditional AI before ChatGPT arrived was already incredibly impactful, right? It's impacting a whole range of fields, too numerous to mention, frankly. But a lot of AI, our daily lives are actually already impacted by a lot of AI systems that are running in production worldwide in many different places. I think what's interesting about ChatGPT is the following. I think because it has the ability to generate human-like output, human-like text, I think we have to understand that it's going to have a massive impact on jobs. Traditional AI did not have that impact. But ChatGPT, I think, is very different. This particular breed of AI is very different. So if you like, we could talk a bit about the impact of ChatGPT on like the economy and jobs.
Sure, yeah.
Makes sense.
So I want to talk about the economy and jobs. Also on politics and the government.
Yeah.
Both, here in the US and the worldwide, because everywhere.
Yeah.
And then also about overall interconnection in the society at the community level. How. So these are three areas that.
Sure. I mean, those are all the weighty questions, Upendra.
Okay, sure. And that's why I'm asking you.
Well, no pressure. So, I'll give you my 2 cents on this. So maybe we start with the impact on jobs. I think it's useful, first of all, to sort of maybe make the distinction between a job and a task. So all of us, whatever jobs we are doing, each job is really a bunch of different tasks that we do. Like as a professor, I have the task of keeping up with the literature. I have the task of reading, synthesizing the literature and figuring out what's useful to my students. I, of course, have to prepare the lectures, have to deliver the lectures, have to prepare the assignments, grade the assignments, direct the TAs. The list goes on. And your job, I'm sure, you have a whole list of things you have to do. So rather than look at the job as a whole, I think it's useful to look at each of the tasks that make up the job and then ask, is this task automatable using ChatGPT? To some degree. Maybe not 100%, but to some degree. And if you look at it through the task lens and not the job lens, I think just about every job has at least one task which is going to get automated by ChatGPT, in my opinion. And in fact, there was a recent study from the University of Pennsylvania which said that, for at least 80% of jobs out there, at least 10% of tasks in each of those jobs is going to get automated.
Really?
Right. So the thing is, so once you realize that some aspect of what every one of us does is going to get automated, there are really two things that can happen. So let's take a software company, right? They have engineers, software engineers. They also have marketing people, salespeople, and so on. So maybe now, instead of having two marketing folks who are, writing your blog posts and creating content and things like that, maybe you can just need one. Maybe one person with ChatGPT can deliver the same output as two people. In which case, what will you do? Would you actually keep the same number of people and double your output? Or will you actually reduce your staff to just one person and maintain the current level of output, right? That's an interesting question. Now, for certain kinds of activities like marketing, maybe you don't need to double the output. Maybe there's no economic value for you to have double the number of blog posts or double the amount of content. You're already sort of maxed out. In which case, you probably reduce your force, right? But if you look at software, maybe you don't need, you can produce the same level of features with half the number of engineers, or maybe you can double the rate of features that you produce, double the product acceleration. You might end up doing the latter. You might decide that, I'm going to keep the same number of people, but I can release features at a faster rate, so I'm going to go that way. So depending on the particular job, the jobs might reduce because you don't care to increase the overall output, or you might be like, things have become cheaper to produce these things, and there's so much demand for what we need to do. I'm just going to keep the number of people I have and just ramp up the output. So it really depends on which of these two things is going to happen. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. It's not that everything is going to be a job loss, right? So there's a distinction there.
It also might create some new jobs, right?
Yes, exactly.
Though you mentioned that new things are emerging into even the chat.
Exactly right. So it's going to get a whole bunch of new jobs. Prompt engineer is just one recent example that I've seen. But, we can't predict these things. Right before the advent of social media, if I had said, hey, there's this job going to be a job called social media, consultant. It's going to show up and we're like, what's that, right? We wouldn't know. So a lot of new jobs are going to get created. But we also have to remember that even with these new jobs, the people who lose the old jobs, can they actually be trained and will they be able to do the new jobs? Are they qualified new jobs? It's unclear. Similarly, are the new jobs going to be fulfilling, less grunt work, more meaningful? We don't know, right? These are all the big unknowns. But in my opinion, there's no question there's going to be a massive impact on the jobs for the economy.
And both losing jobs and creating more jobs as well. That depends on the type of job.
Exactly.
So now every time, it's a very philosophical question for you, is if you look at last 1,000 years of the human civilization, every few hundred years there have been a big shift in the technology and business and from basics to everything today. Even in our lifetime, we've seen from television to the internet to now we're talking about AI and ChatGPT and all this stuff. And every time this big thing happens, there is a lot of nervousness in the market. And right now we are at the phase that there's going to be seismic shift or something like that might happen in the economy or in the world. So I want you to, what you think personally, that how the whole thing is going to impact, as I mentioned earlier, which, again, I'm repeating that to talk a little bit about its impact on the government, the political process, the society.
Yeah. Well, those are very weighty questions. So my view is that, first of all, let me just put out a caveat that this is just speculation. Who knows what's going to happen, right? But that said, I think that we have talked about the impact on jobs, clearly. I think another impact is going to be that it may actually, aggravate and worsen income inequality. Right? It's very possible that sort of the folks who benefit most from this are going to be the people who are already very well off and rich. And so it may actually widen the income gap, the equality gap may widen as well. Number two. Number three, I think that because of the ability to generate information at zero cost right now, the rate of misinformation growth is going to be dramatic. And I think what may happen is that it's going to become, our information sort of space is going to get so polluted, we won't be able to easily tell whether it's good information or bad information, which means that we'll end up distrusting everything that we see because we don't know what to believe. And that can be very harmful for democracy, for democratic processes. So people may stop believing what people are saying. People may stop believing experts and so on and so forth. And we have seen some of it already in the recent past.
Yeah, already started to see that the campaign which was put by Trump team about coming from that. So
right. So that's going to happen. I think all political parties are going to use this. Everybody's going to use it because if you don't use it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So I think there is, I believe, I would say a threat to democracy, but we have to be very careful because I think it's going to have a lot of interesting, unexpected consequences on democracy. So in terms of public discourse in democracy, there's going to be a massive impact, no question about that. But then moving even maybe higher up the Maslow hierarchy, one thing that I often think about is, if ChatGPT is going to do my writing for me, if it's going to do my summary for me, if it's going to do my synthesis for me, if it's going to do my programming for me, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Very
So I mean, is it going to be the case that because we are losing practice with writing, with thinking, and things like that we are sort of going to become dumber over time, right? That is one point of view. And it's a lot of very smart people are worried about or thinking about this question.
I mean, already this question you go to a get together or you're talking about like kids, what's going to happen all the time they're on phone and they're browsing and how. So of course,
exactly.
Very
and so the browsing is an interesting one because there you're worried that your kids are essentially being passive consumers of content as opposed to active creators of content, and therefore it's going to lead to a dumbing down over time. Here it's actually much worse because even for doing your work, you can just outsource it to ChatGPT, right? In which case you lose practice with that. Your muscles, your mental muscles are going to atrophy over time. Mm-hmm. Is that a problem? The thing is, I'm on the fence about this, frankly, because let me just give an analogy, an example from the past. Socrates, at the time of his life, he was considered the smartest man alive, and to this day, considered one of the smartest people who ever lived. Mm-hmm. So he when he was informed by his students that this neighboring country or civilization, I forget, they had adopted the use of writing stuff down, right? They were using it for a lot of commerce and trade. They said, we should also start writing things down, right? It was a very oral culture at that point. Yeah. And they were like, we should shift to writing because writing sounds like a really good thing. And Socrates, right? The smartest person of his age.
The Greek philosopher.
Yeah, philosopher. He was really against it. He thought writing was a terrible idea. And he actually said that writing is going to weaken our memories. He said it's going to make us all stupid. So let's not do writing. So there was no writing in his school, right? And only Plato, his student, he was the one who actually wrote stuff that Socrates said. Otherwise, we wouldn't even know what Socrates was thinking.
Sure.
So obviously, I think we can all agree that writing is a good thing.
Of course.
Right? So the question is, if Socrates could be wrong about the impact of the invention of writing on society, what hope do we have about predicting the impact of something like ChatGPT? What's going to happen? Right? I don't know.
Okay.
And so my feeling is that, my hope rather, is that while simple things are going to become automatable using ChatGPT, I think that it may free us up to do more complex, more intellectually demanding tasks, more, higher level cognitive tasks. And we may view things like ChatGPT as just one more tool in our toolkit to do all kinds of interesting things. So that is my hope, that, the grunt work goes away, the more interesting thing happens, and we are all operating at a much higher plane of abstraction with thinking and things like that.
I think you already summarized very well our interview. But still, I want you to look in the camera and tell anyone who is skeptical about ChatGPT or AI, what is your last word to them?
My last words, I would say that I think there is much that is unknown about the future. But I do think, and I've been in the tech industry for a long time, 3 decades, and the large language models and ChatGPT and AI that we're seeing right now are truly, in my opinion, a seminal advance in technology and science. And I think what that means is that every one of us, whether we are enthusiastic about it or whether we're apprehensive about it, I would say that actually spend time as an individual working with these tools, with ChatGPT, with Bard, with Bing, and so on and so forth. Because only when you actually roll up your sleeves and work with them, you develop this visceral understanding of what it means to work with these tools and the impact they're going to have on us, on our society. And I further think that the people who embrace these tools and work with them and really get into them and make it part of their mental toolkit will do a lot better in an uncertain future than people who are recoiling from it for various reasons. So I strongly encourage you to just dive in, embrace these tools, and I think that will actually prepare you much better for the future that is actually arriving really fast as we speak.
Excellent. On that note, Rama, thank you so much. I really enjoyed and learned so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Upendra.
Excellent. Always. Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.